Hello there. We have here the ending positions of the one-day scenario of the game of Aspern Essling by there's the title by from the Victor stable of games. It's I don't know if it ever came in the magazine. I don't think so. It comes in this kind of slim folio. It's a member of the Jours de Glorie game system. Now, we have here the Danube River. Vienna is some way over there, and the Battle of Wagram will occur some days later, sort of more around this area. But essentially, Napoleon attempted a crossing of the Danube. He had a fortified salient here, and had taken the towns of Aspern and Essling from the Austrians, but was faced with a much larger Austrian force, which has managed to push him out of both the towns in the game that I'm playing. So we have lands here, Massena here, Napoleon himself here. French are in blue. These are some routed French units. They have a bridge over here which is in good order. There's another bridge further on which has been broken by off-map activities, and these are all the Austrian forces, some routed here from sort of a last-ditch cavalry charge by Bessieres cavalry formation here, which knocked back threatening sort of force was hoping to come round and do something to salvage the situation around Essling, but it wasn't possible. There was just too many Austrian forces. Some had come on reinforcements as the game was played. So this was a 5-turn scenario, and that's the end of the first day scenario. You could play the second day scenario, which is, I think, full 12 turns, so each turn represents an hour and a half of time. Or you could play the 2-day scenario, which portrays both days, in which, if I continued, the French would actually start getting major reinforcements. All these units over here are French reinforcements. The Austrians have all their units on the board at the moment. So the French would stand quite a good chance on a counter-attack, especially seeing as they have held the point here at the end of this day, although it's a resounding Austrian victory because they took the 2 towns, which is victories upon victory point hexes and losses. Now I'm going to stop the game here. I had intended to play the 2-day scenario, but I'm stopping now because I find it's not the game for me as a solo player. But I think it's a very excellent game, a game I would enjoy opposed. Now I'll go into some reasons why and wherefore, and maybe a little bit of detail about the game system. So first a note about the system. It's Jours de Glorie, which is Days of Glory, and it was based, the series originated in 1997 with, it says here, a close collaboration with Richard H. Berg, the designer of Victory and the Glory, Triumph and Glory, and the Glory series, so the Glory rules. So I believe there's 3 iterations of Glory, so it's a very successful and popular system. This was based on that, but has since gone through its own evolutions, and I think a lot of it was probably to do with cavalry and cavalry charges. So the rules take up 10 pages, 10 A4 pages, nicely illustrated, very clear, and I believe they're all sort of complete. There's a few, sort of grey areas I didn't worry about, like just a couple. And then there's Aspern Essling, has its own specific rules, encased in the same rules folder. Then you get a terrain effects chart. You get a 1-page tables chart, which is essentially just tables for artillery fire and then shock or charge. So shock and charge are handled the same. The shock attack includes musketry fire. You have something like 200 meters per hex, and the units are brigades or regiments. or the equivalent, and as I said, each turn's an hour and a half. Now, so what we have here is kind of like a soft rather than a crunchy tactical game, by which I mean it's what might be called grand tactical. So you're not bothered with facing of unit in movement. It does matter in fire and combat. But you're not sort of putting units into extending lines and so forth at this scale. And with these rules, what it's a chit pull system. So down here you have all the chits that I pulled in the last turn. So you can see there's a lot. There's 2 for each unit, and the last unit that comes out of the pot never gets activated. The last chit. So in every turn, units will get activated twice. And another sort of twist on that is represented by these markers. So formation. So have a blue formation, or purple formation, grey, so forth. They are either given orders, so they're in orders state, or a no orders state. And if they're in no orders, they have to basically make an activation to combat, unless they're artillery. And they have half movement. If they're in orders, then they can just freely move and attack without any restrictions other than the rules give. Basic rules. There's a lot to like about it, because it's very quick. Like with all these units, even with all those activations, a turn might only take like half an hour for me playing solo. But I just found that as for solo, it didn't sort of give enough bite to make it interesting as a solo play. It would make the sort of quick play and the chit activation system will make it an exciting game opposed, I imagine. So I believe that this game gave me like a nice broad oversight into the Battle of Aspern and Essling, but it would be a broad oversight rather than a sort of more detailed La Bataille, or perhaps MBS treatment of it. So how does the system differ? Well, one thing is that in this system, shock and or charge combat, so that's all combat that isn't artillery fire, is heavily favoured in the attacker's favour. So if you're attacking, you got reasonable, not even sort of reasonable odds and so forth, because it's not an odds based. You roll a d10 and you add up certain factors, and then depending on where you are where your modified die roll is, you have certain effects, and often it's defend a retreat and or lose cohesion, so sort of become disrupted. It favours the attack a lot, which it makes for an interesting game that could be quite swingy, in the sense that I move in, attack, push you out of, in say this case, Essling there, and then on your turn, if you have forces, you move back in, push me out. So it could be quite swingy like that, and provided you have enough reserves. So if the defender if there's a deleterious effect on the defender in the combat, then there's no penalty to the attacker, and then vice versa. So either the attacker or the defender are having bad effects, but never both. So it's very kind of like this or that, and then that would, providing you have enough reserves, that means, as I said, it could be quite swingy. Then the other thing is that because of the D10, the use of the D10, there's a widespread of luck, in the sense that you could either on the roll there could either I can't express that very well, but say if your unit has a Now, I'm trying to think it through in my head how to explain it, but I can't really, and maybe it's unwarranted, but I just felt that with the D10, it's kind of like the swings of luck go one way or the other more than it might have been if it had all been sort of boiled down into a D6 base. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it's just the impression I get. I suppose what the D10 does do is it allows a bit more finesse in, for example, the shock and charge table has effects on less than 0, then between 0 and 4, 5 to 9 and 10. So, you can sort of get a bit more sophistication, but I don't know, the sense I had that it could all be boiled down into a D6, and it would seem just a bit more sort of solid than such wide possible swings. Yeah, so it's interesting. So combat favors the attacker. You have wide die roll. The main tactic, the sort of a main tactic seems to be to try and break the enemy's line. So you have formations, and they have to be within a certain distance of your overall leader. Like there's Archduke Charles there, for example. And the formations have to be able to be in orders, and the formations have to be within each unit within 2 hexes of each other. Now, if you break that up, then that formation would then need 2 orders to put all of them in order status. So that seems like a main tactic to try and break the enemy's line, so it's harder to put them all in command. But having said that, most units don't seem to be in command, at least in this scenario. For example, Napoleon could only put 1 leader or formation in command, and Charles only 2 at any one time. And Charles has got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 formations possible. And Napoleon could have quite a number, but it can boil down to just 2, because you can sort of subordinate many formations to either Massenet or Lannes. So that tactic wasn't really that important this game, because my leaders had such few possibilities to activate units into full orders. But I think that within the system shows that could be a very viable tactic to do, to break up the command and control of your opponent. Because, as I said, if a unit is in no order status, they have to make engagements tests to attack you. And it's interesting to compare this with other systems. For example, the scale this is at, I find it odd, and I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just interesting how different designers do things, that you can only put a unit into square in your movement phase. So if in the opponent's phase, the opponent's cavalry decides to charge you, there's nothing you can do about it if you're not already in square. For example, the premier rules of the Labat, you can roll to go into square as the cavalry are charging up to you, and I think it's the same in the MBS series. The rules for the MBS are having difficulty sticking in my brain for some reason. Anyway, it's interesting, to look at a system like this, compare it with other Napoleonic tactical, because to see what decisions the designers made, because this designer basically said, in respect to forming square, that to go that way, which is saying it's going to take, and squares cannot move at all in this system, whereas they can in some others. And so it makes you think, what are the designers basing their decisions on? I mean, there's sort of 2 things that come to mind for me. One is that each side kind of abstracts and says, okay, generally squares didn't move, but sometimes they did, so in this system I'm going to allow them always to move, instead of it depending on a particularly good commander or particular situation where it was necessitated. Whereas another designer might say, okay, squares didn't often move, so I'm just going to say that they can never move. Either that sort of decision was meant just to abstract it, just to generalize for simplicity's sake, or I have the sort of interesting situation where the designers are basically saying, now, did squares move? Okay, was there the possibility for squares to move? And a bit of the sense I get is that nobody really knows. Do you know what I mean? We weren't there. We have history after the fact. Some formations moved in square, some didn't? Was it generally viable, etc., etc.? And I think that often we don't know, and so that we end up with, for example, wargame designers making decisions based on their best guess, and then it's sort of handed down to us as the representation. But so what I'm trying to say is we don't really know what we're playing. Is this really what the things we do as a wargamer are? How possible would they be in the actual situation? That's quite apart from just the what if of taking a battle off in unforeseen directions. But anyway, that's interesting. Some differences. The thing about the squares, charges are very powerful in this as well, because especially if you're heavy cavalry, you get a +3 modifier onto any charge, and so especially sort of French against Austrian units with good cavalry, the charges are very powerful, but also very fragile, because you have cavalry units have to test for cohesion at the end of their charge, but they have a lot of potential for follow-up charges as well, which is what resulted in all those routed units there. So an interesting system, ultimately for me, better for opposed play than like a solo study. For a solo study, it's good for the broad brush strokes, and like nice accompaniment to a book or something like that on the battle, but not such an involved study of the battle itself. So yeah, Jours de Glorie series, it's a successful series. There's many battles on it, and a big plus I think they have on it is there's lots of lesser gamed battles that are detailed on it. I don't have the list in front of me at the moment, but that makes an interesting system in itself. And being a simple system, not too complicated to learn, and nice clear rules, means you could play a lot of battles with a lot of facility.